In 1919, he hit 29 home runs and was sold to the New York Yankees.
A three-run home run for Buckington. The Yankees now lead it by a score of 3-2.
Bill Lee is now going over to a couple of the Yankees, and there they go again.
One hits it to deep left. That might send the Yankees to the World Series.
Varitek and A-Rod going at it. Roberts is going. Posada's throw. Roberts safe.
And what can I say? Just tip my hat and call the Yankees my daddies.
Welcome to Fanbase, a deep dive into the greatest rivalry in sports. I'm Brian Chapman along with John Senecal. This is episode 57. John, what's shaking?
Not much. There's not much shaking in the Yankees and the Red Sox universe
No,
either,
there isn't.
really.
You know, I want to get into that. Here's the agenda for the day. We're going to talk about Wander Franco out of the gate because I think it's a really interesting conversation, the contract, the guy, the team, and then we'll get into what moves have or haven't been done by the Red Sox and the Yankees, and then I want to have a little bit of conversation about pitching and then get into Hall of Fame with A-Rod and Big Papi. So let's start off with Wander Franco. I mean, the details of the deal, what you had it written down properly, right? Because
it's 11. They call it a contract extension, but the way he's technically not eligible for free agency until 2027 if he actually played and didn't get a contract.
But this doesn't start in 27.
No, it starts this coming season. So they're buying out all his years of arbitration and all that good stuff. And, so 11 years, $182 million with a club option for 2033. That's crazy when you say that, 2033. For $25 million. So I guess it's like around, what. If it's 11 years, $182 million, it's like 16.5 annually, but it doesn't come out to that because then it would be $40 million on the back end around. So, but $25 million for him in 2033 sounds like a hell of a deal, doesn't it?
Sure. Well, it depends on where he's at, but in 2033, don't forget, he'll only be 32 years old.
And if he's a remote shell of what he's done in his big 70 games of Major League experience, that's a great deal.
So let's take it through this methodically. We say the average salary is, just say, 16, 17 million or whatever. Do you think this is a good deal? Both you can start from the player and then start from the franchise.
Absolutely. It's a great deal. I mean, just to start off, he's a switch hitter, right? Nobody in baseball is touted as the number one prospect for 3 years in a row and gets into the major leagues at 20 or 21 years old, right? And is not good. Chipper Jones basically did it, and then he blew his knee out when he was supposed to be a rookie, and he had to come back, and look where he wound up. Ken Griffey Jr., he wasn't even around long enough in the minor leagues for them to even talk about that. He was just expected to do it. But, he's a special player. He really is. I mean, I dogged him about being nominated for Rookie of the Year just because of the pure fact that he only had 70 games experience and no other reason than that, right? We know he's a good player. So, yes, the answer is a great deal.
But a great deal for whom?
For the team.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because
for him,
when they don't spend many money, their payroll was $70 million last year, right? Now, that sounds like a lot for them. Yeah,
but relative to what they're guaranteed to get from TV in the league,
right?
They're basically already in the black without getting anyone to go, and no one goes. But is it a good deal for him?
Listen, you talk about it all the time. Like Ronald Acuna, that deal looks like crazy deal for the Braves because they got him for like 8 years, $100 million. But for these players that where they come from, it's a great deal for him. I mean, Is
it a union pissing off deal?
I mean, honestly, I think that's not even so much of a thought anymore because these players, if the union wants to proceed, they need players like him. They need players like Tatis. And
if this guy signs a deal that gets into free agency and he's a superstar, he would be earning double in the AAV. Yeah, right. So in terms of they're all concerned, the union, about average salary, and this doesn't help them if this guy's a superstar. That's that's the way it goes.
I mean, they want the money sooner than later. I mean, I would look at it more of he's paving the way for more. I mean, there's the contract. I hate to say that the union is going to cry like they need more money. The contracts that they're getting are insane, and they're always going to bitch and moan that the owners are making more money and the owners are zillionaires, right? But that's just how it's going to work. So. If you're the players' union, I wouldn't be complaining about this. There's going to be more contracts. There's going to be bigger contracts. And you're talking about contracts out there that were 3 or 4 years old. Manny Machado, Bryce Harper, that are huge contracts, $300 million contracts. So if you think about it, they really haven't went up that much in the last 3 or 4 years. Although the age of the player is going down.
Well, and I think that's where it is better for the team. I mean, this to me is a huge team-friendly deal, not only because of the annual average salary, but also because of the player age. I mean, he's 20 years old. So when this contract's done, it's 11 or 12 years. He'll be in his early 30s. You are guaranteeing him for his best years. We've seen these contracts, whether it's hard, I don't know what the age of those guys, but a lot of these guys are signing 10-year deals when they're in their late 20s.
Right.
And there's a huge difference between being 32 and being an unrestricted free agent and 39. I mean, it's not an end of career contract, which if you think about it, if this guy does end up being a bit of it, he doesn't even have to be a generational star. If he's a top tier player, he probably has a 5-year deal after this.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And if he gets hurt in this contract, it really doesn't kill the Rays or him. I mean,
because the overall number isn't 300. It's only,
he's going to blow his knee out. I mean, that's really like you're going to be out for a while.
But you joked me on text about, that he'll probably play for 3 teams on this deal.
Yeah.
Right? It makes him tradable.
Yeah. I mean, he'll probably play for 2 cities in one season, and then he'll probably wind up playing in a whole other city for the same team because they'll probably move the team, and then he might get traded.
I mean, I think the part
so
of
he
this
could play
deal,
for 4 different cities.
Yeah, I mean, I really honestly think that this protects the team, that if they need to dump,
so he can go.
He's so tradable. This is such a. I mean, I'm not saying that you trade him now, but say in 5 years, there's some transition, some ownership team where they need to rebuild. I mean,
you can get him for $20 million or 18 or whatever the annual value.
And again, the Tampa's philosophy, in 5 years, if he's still a bona fide star and you need to rebuild, you could get. Forget about you could get a huge haul for him.
And he's a switch hitter. He's above average defender at shortstop. And as he gets bigger and older, he could easily move to third base or first base.
I don't know anything about his personality and his makeup, right? Like, I don't know. It's like when I first saw,
he's got the MLB logo tattooed on him.
But when I first had Rafi Devers, I had Rafi Devers labeled as sort of like apathetic and out of shape, and it turns out he does care. He's just a different kind of guy who smiles when he's stressed. You know what I mean? Like, those are simple. I just don't know about this guy's character. I just don't. He's 20. He's a baby. Like, when you think about where you were at 20 years old, and you're guaranteed $180 million at 20. Like, I literally couldn't keep my life together. I didn't have a job with benefits until I was 26. Like, I know they have good people around him, but it's just, he's so young.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, the Angels gave Josh Hamilton $200 million, and he was.
Yeah, I wonder where he is today. I'm curious. I mean, I've interviewed him.
I know he's had some problems with his family. I know he got into
domestic
stuff.
I will tell you, I've done a lot of work with people who suffer from substance use disorder, and there's a vulnerability to it. Like, when I interviewed him when he was with the Angels, and there was something endearing about him because you could tell how vulnerable a human being. Here is this big, strong guy who's one of the most talented athletes on the planet, and he looked fragile.
Yeah, so I saw him at the All-Star game at Yankee Stadium in 2008, the old Yankee Stadium, when he hit all those home runs. And he was there the next day. I was actually there for the game, and at batting practice on the field. And there was no player that went around and was interacting with the fans along the fence and talking to the fans and everything more than he was. And I think that kind of speaks to probably what you're saying. You know, he was very religious. He found God and all that. You know, if you read his story, obviously it's crazy.
Yeah.
But maybe that was him just kind of saying, I'm grateful for what I got. But yeah, he did. I think he kind of did take a wrong turn again.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll do it for a future episode. He's John Senecal. I'm Brian Shackman. This is Fan Base Deep Dive into the greatest rivalry in sports. Let's move on to the teams, what they've done and haven't done. Let's start with the Yankees, where the only thing I saw was they got rid of Ronald Odor and Clint Frazier, and what else have they done?
Red Devil is finally dead.
Who's to say they won't bring him back on a minor league deal to go to training camp, and then somehow he earns a spot on the team?
Well, they released, they did the same thing. They released Tyler Wade. Well, they didn't release Tyler Wade. They outrighted him, and then they wound up trading him. So they actually released the Red Devil and Odor, so they can't trade them. So they could bring them back, but they're not tradable.
They couldn't get anybody for them.
Yeah, so they're basically thinking that nobody wants them anyway. So, I mean, the Red Devil sounds like he's more interested in, he just got married or getting married and, wearing sneakers and posting stuff on Instagram. I mean, obviously he's got health issues. There's something going on with his head. Not like he's crazy or anything, but he's been suffering from issues for the last 3 seasons since he hit the wall in spring training that one year.
Yeah.
So who knows what's going on with him. So, best of luck to the Red Devil. He if anything, he gave us some very memorable catches in the outfield for the Yankees.
Yeah, so that's all they've done, right?
That's it. Well, they got the Mets' former manager, Luis Rojas, is their third base coach. Boone re-signed for 3 years. Say what you want about that.
That's old news, right?
Cora re-signed for you guys, so you know.
Right. So let's talk about the Red Sox then for a second, because it is interesting. I mean, they picked up they picked up the options on Cora, so I think he's there through 2024, which is kind of a no-brainer, although nobody wants to operate with, a one, as they said in Moneyball, it's hard to manage on a one-year deal. So that's a good thing, but that's just stability, and that's a kind of a non-event. The Eduardo Rodriguez signing with Detroit, to me, is going to sort of
the precursor to Carlos Correa.
Well, no.
Signing with Detroit.
Well, that might be true, but I also think, although that seemed to come a little too early, and it has, who knows what's going to happen. But I think it makes me want to transition into a pitcher conversation, because, his average annual salary with that $77 million deal is not that much. I mean, and he's a good enough pitcher to it's not, he didn't get vastly overpaid, is my point. That deal is not too much. And
it's like an Aaron Hicks deal.
They can say that they didn't want to give him the years, which is fine, because he's had health issues he had myocarditis, and there are some motivation issues with him. I'm not sure. It's hard to read. He's a hard guy to read, but people question his motivation. But to me, it's a symbol with how quiet the Red Sox have been in free agency, and letting Eduardo go for something they easily, John, could have assumed, means that I don't think they are going to look at any frontline pitching like the way they used to.
Or maybe they know something somebody else doesn't know.
About what?
I don't know. I mean, he missed all that time. Maybe they're freaked out about that.
No, see, I think it's about philosophy. I think this whole thing, like the Tampa with the 5-6 different pitchers and not wanting to see people.
You're going to go down more that direction?
I do, and I think that, it's funny, I was listening to a bunch of sports radio in Boston, because I've been back and forth a ton in the last couple of weeks, and they think that this whole Tampifying of the pitchers has ruined the game. So they basically blame. So the Moneyball thing sort of like was this incredible, tectonic shift in baseball, right? And it's taken 20 years ago it started.
Right. Yeah.
And now here we are 20 years later, and these guys, a lot of the guys I was listening to basically have made the conclusion that the sabermetrics data people have ruined the game. And pitching's part of it. Shift, pitching, all of it.
Yeah.
And I think that, I'm not going to want to go to 4-hour games, even if I love going to the ballpark. And I love, maybe I'm old school and I need to adapt, because there is evolution. But I like going to see Pedro or Clemens,
right,
or Musina.
Yeah, we talked about that before. Your starters, your main guys.
How do you feel about the game if that goes away? You basically, what you're going to end up having on a 25-man roster, instead of 12 or 13 pitchers, you're going to have fewer position players and more pitchers. And that's going to change the game even further. And so we don't know what the collateral impact is of that, having fewer position players. So are you going to start looking for a different type of player? Does that all of a sudden make a Brock Holt more valuable because he can play 4 positions and doesn't, have a big price tag?
Man, that's a tough question, because there's so many different variables in it, because then you start talking about how.
Yeah, but give me your opinion. How do you feel about it? Do you like it? Do you
hate
it? Do you not care? Do you love it?
I want to go see the pitcher. I want to see the pitcher, the main starter, go out there and last as long as he can. That's what I want to see. But what's going to happen is it's going to change the whole, like we talked about before, the whole philosophy of how players are getting paid too. Nobody's going to pay some dude to go out there and throw 3 innings. They're not going to pay him $30 million a year. Right?
Or some teams, there'll be a split. Not all 30 teams will do it, and then the Detroits
eventually they'll have to conform, right? If it's working one way or working the other way, everyone's going to have to eventually try to do it.
Well, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to root for it not to work.
I don't want it to work either. I would rather see a guy go out there and last as long as he can, and then get to the back end of the game.
Problem is over time.
Call me a purist, but I guess if that's a purist.
But if the data is data, because it goes back and researches facts over time. So you would assume that over time, if a team gives it enough reps, that it will work, right? Essentially, I don't know what the variable that I learned this year through Tampa is that the data is over a long space of time. But when you get into small increments like 7-game series,
right,
the data may not have enough time to bear itself out,
right?
Which is so that's why I think that taking a team like Atlanta that sort of reshaped itself at the trade deadline, you could sort of like almost like do the data-driven type of game until X,
Right.
and then from the rest of the way in, do the other way or whatever. Like, I don't know.
Need a little bit of both to work.
I don't know, because, I mean, it's clear that there are blind spots in the sabermetrics when it comes to short sample sizes. And playoffs are a short sample size. And that's one thing I don't think the data-driven analysts have been able to crack.
No, and how are you? I mean, you can only put in so many clocks and so many rules. I mean, what are you going to do? You can't put in you can't put in a rule that says, "Oh, you can only have this many pitchers" or whatever. I mean, I don't know how you would do it to make, because like you said, then the game's going to slow down because you're going to change pitchers every 2 innings, and then you're going to, I don't know.
It's going to suck. I mean, and so I'm rooting against it, but I still think that the one hope is the playoffs. So that's when in the playoffs I'm going to root for your big budget frontline pitching.
I mean,
whatever.
if you look at it one way, it goes back to being like in Little League, you know, you got a guy threw 70 pitches over 2 innings, and you bring in the next kid.
Yeah, sure.
You know?
Eventually, you get some guy throwing ephus pitches.
I mean, you really don't even matter what kind of pitch
hanging
you got.
on for dear
if you
life.
got a dude that can just go out there and just wing it for 2 innings and kind of keep you in it. Why not?
All right, let's go to the Hall of Fame. We're not going to break down everybody, you know, from Tim Lincecum to, you know, we know that Clemens, Bonds, and Sammy Sosa are on their 10th year, but I think the real
Isn't Schilling too? Isn't he his last year?
I don't even know. I don't want to talk about Kurt Schilling.
But he was like his last year was 71%, so you got to have 75, right? So he's the closest. I still don't think he's going to make it. Bonds isn't going to make it. Clemens isn't going to make it.
And you know Sammy Sosa's not going to make it.
No.
So let's talk about Alex Rodriguez and Big Papi.
Those are the only two this year that really have any sort of legitimate shot.
I mean, Tim
of making
Lincecum. I mean, whatever. So when you think about
Dude
it,
threw like 5 no-hitters, didn't he? Tim Lincecum?
yeah,
I feel like he did.
He looked like one of the characters in the movie Dazed and Confused. You know, it's just like the long
Right.
hair.
Well, he was one of the first guys that had the long hair, and everyone was looking at him like he was crazy.
Yeah,
and then
man,
when
it
Jacob
was-
deGrom does it, it's
Right.
cool.
Right, exactly.
Speaking of which, freaking Thor got $20 million from the Angels. The Angels love spending money, dude.
They love spending money randomly.
They just
I mean,
love
it's
spending
just
money.
bizarre.
That guy just must be sitting around in his house with piles of money.
You know what? Good for him. I mean, if he can make it, if someone wants to give it to him, I can't begrudge it.
All right,
Now,
A-Rod and Ortiz.
so listen, they both. I mean,
Are
A-Rod
steroid
got
users.
busted. A-Rod lied, right? A-Rod. Forget about the fact
So
that
the
he's.
old guys, the steroid guys are on their way out, and the HGH
And the-
guys are on their way in.
So, and you look at Alex Rodriguez, who, you know, kind of was widely people kind of hated him, and then he's just was too perfect, and this and that, and then he lies, gets busted, and serves his time, and then sort of reimagines himself, and has done quite well.
Reimagines himself. Dude, he did the biggest 180 in the history.
Well, you see articles even this week. I used to, because how did A-Rod become Alex? You know what I mean? How did he do it? Right? And so he's popular, even though his thing with J-Lo. I honestly think that stuff ends up having an impact, even as
Absolutely.
far as like voting.
Like he
in the Hall of
needed
Fame.
her to grease him up and get him back.
Yeah, when he was
Back on the
he was a
straight.
DB to her, and everyone, that's another strike against him.
Yep.
And then Big Papi never got caught, but he was in the Mitchell report mentioned and never got caught. And I think there's a lot of people out there in the know, like the journalists who vote, who do think
The one guy that didn't vote for Jeter, those guys.
No, not those guys. The guys who are purists who think that Big Papi did use PEDs. So there's no chance that they're getting in first ballot. That isn't even a conversation. The question is, how much do they get percentage-wise, and does that set them up to get in?
I was amazed that when I went back and looked at A-Rod's numbers that he had 696 home runs.
Yeah, it's insane.
295 average, 3,115 hits, 2,086 RBIs.
No, there's no doubt the numbers are Hall of Fame worthy. That's not
But
the
how much
question.
of those numbers are inflated, though?
I mean, that's the same thing with Bonds. Like, A-Rod probably was a Hall of Famer without the PEDs, but that's not the point. The point is,
Listen, those guys didn't even get caught. Bonds and Clemens, those guys legit didn't even get caught.
they did, though.
Bonds didn't.
Yeah,
Bonds never got proved anything. Clemens was all hearsay that he was getting injected in a.
I'm sorry.
The Sky Dome.
If you're going to discredit McNamee because he's got a troubled life, to me, he was caught. He just wasn't, found guilty of a crime.
Right, never
but
suspended.
whatever.
But they weren't playing.
Answer the question. The question
No,
is,
he doesn't get in.
no, but what are the percentages? And does it set
what
them
percentage?
up? Yeah, they're not getting in first
A-Rod?
ballot. We know that.
I mean, Ortiz is going to get more than A-Rod, I think. Unless A-Rod, is just...
but he's a DH. A lot of people handicap for being a
but
DH.
his numbers are way off the charts compared to, other than average compared to Edgar Martinez. They're just so much better.
Right.
other than average.
And the plus of the clutch factor and the World Series factor.
Yeah,
This is huge.
You can't discredit that. I mean,
Do
Edgar Martinez had one big hit.
50?
In
They
90,
get 50%? Do they get 60?
Ortiz or A-Rod?
Listen, I mean, first of all, I don't know what the numbers are going to be, so I'm putting you on the spot.
Bonds last year got 61.8. Clemens 61.6.
But that's in 9 years on the ballot. That's
right.
I wonder
it's
where they
went
were
up.
in year one. I should have looked it up before.
But
but
I would say A-Rod gets if he gets 40%, I'd be surprised.
40, you'd be surprised?
I'd be surprised at 40. I'd say 33, maybe a third of the people. And then I would say Ortiz is probably. I think Ortiz is going to surprise us, and he's going to be like 58.
You think it'll be that high?
Yeah, close to 60. I mean, listen, dude. The whole not getting legit caught is huge, right? And I think a lot of people totally forgotten about the Mitchell report because of Alex Rodriguez. To be honest with you, he has taken so much heat off of the people that were mentioned in that report because he got just so caught and just dude, if you go and read the whole story behind Alex Rodriguez and all the crap that he did behind the scenes trying to get that whole thing disappear and how many people he stabbed in the back.
Armstrong.
It's
Yeah.
awful. It's just so bad. And if people knew what a piece of crap he was, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But somehow they don't know. He's went out in the dark web and went in Wikipedia and went everywhere and just scrubbed it.
Really?
He scrubbed his life. I don't know. He's annoying. I can't stand him.
A-Rod.
Oh, I'm done with him. I just wish he'd go away.
Well, you were on the bandwagon. You invested in his SPAC and everything.
Can't
and now
stand him.
I can't tell with you.
I can't stand him.
Because he's let you down so many times.
He's just cheated, dude. How bad can you cheat? Honestly,
They've all cheated.
Everybody's cheated, right? But dude, he like I just said, read his story. A lot of people got caught. And they're like, screw it, I got caught, right? Cano, he got caught again, got caught again. I don't think he was trying to have his cousin killed or something.
Right.
You know what I mean? A-Rod's a piece of crap, dude. He really is.
I think that's probably true. So I don't know how he pulls it off. I think you're right. I think Big Papi will get more. Then just a quick question: do you think either of them ever get in? In 9 years, I can't see David Ortiz not getting into the Hall of Fame.
I would say Ortiz gets in. I just feel like A-Rod is just jerked up his career so bad to the baseball people and not the Hollywood people and all the the glitz and glamour. I just think he's never gonna get in. If Bonds doesn't get in, dude.
I think the thing with Bonds is like Rose. I think that they'll get in when they're gone. I do.
And that
I think
sucks.
Yeah, I think just that's the reality. Hey, you got a nugget here, Hall of Fame related, Red Sox, Yankees.
I was just looking and I was curious how many Red Sox and how many Yankees are in the Hall of Fame, and got 24.
Yankees have more.
Well, of course they do.
Blah, blah.
They're better players usually, right, over the years.
Okay.
24 to the Yankees and 14 for the Red Sox, and everybody knows the last two to go in for each.
Well, I know Jeter was Pedro.
And then Pedro, right?
Yeah.
The crazy thing about Pedro is he played for 5 different teams in his career.
And his
from
numbers,
98 to 2000.
his overall high, gross numbers are not overwhelming.
No. He had 219 and 100 for his wins losses. But he had that one he had a short stretch where he was just awesome. Just insanely awesome. And that was when he was with Boston, coming out of the Expos to Boston.
I call it the Sandy Koufax effect. I mean, Koufax only had 9 seasons, but they were some of them were the most dominant of all time. Pedro
at the right time too.
Outside of Kerry Wood at his best, because people who don't understand, there was if you saw Kerry Wood that one season, he was throwing wiffle balls, you know, and Pedro was the most he was more dominant than Clemens.
Yeah,
because Clemens would overpower you. But literally, I don't say literally, I get on my kids for saying that. When Pedro was up, he had such command of 3 pitches, you didn't know what he was going to throw.
Right.
You had no idea.
Yep.
He would throw a in the dirt curveball on 3-2 and get you. You just didn't know what was coming.
And even later in his career, when he couldn't get his fastball up to 98, he could still somehow, the late movement or something would overpower you with his fastball at 94. He
was so good, and he was not good to the media. He was a weird teammate, but we tend to glorify him with time. But when he was at his best, you would pay, that's why the starting pitching debate, you would pay money only to see him.
Right? Yes, absolutely. You would get excited if you went and bought a ticket for the season and lined up that
you
he was
check the
pitching.
papers to see. I got Tuesday's game. Oh crap! I get I got
Well,
to
same
see
thing
Wakefield
goes now.
again.
Like, when we go to a game, I'm like, all right, well, we're gonna miss Cole by one day.
Yeah.
Oh, we're gonna get this guy because it's we got Nestor Cortez. I'm like, and the kids are like, this sucks. I wanted to see Cole pitch.
Right.
Well, yeah, we're gonna see Cole pitch next time for an inning and a half.
Right. That's the reality. All right, John, that's great stuff.
Pedro
Appreciate it.
did balloon up nice though too.
Who
Have you
did?
seen him?
Yeah, he's big.
He's big, dude.
big. Well,
and
listen,
Poppy shrunk.
Well, ever since Poppy got shot,
yeah.
he's been
Whole new perspective on life.
It's just, things are a little bit different. All right, John, great job as always. This is Fan Base, a deep dive into the greatest rivalry in sports. Enjoy us on YouTube, on Odyssey.com, or wherever you enjoy your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.